Do you feel like your hormones are all wonky? Do you feel like you just can't get control of how you are feeling emotionally, physically, and mentally? Let's talk all about hormones today. Hormones in the perimenopause season of life do tend to drive us women a little bit nutty sometimes, right? But do they really have to? Is it possible to get back to the basics for optimal health even during this crazy time? My guest today says absolutely. Leisha Drews is an RN and holistic hormone coach, and we will be talking about some very important changes you can make to help your body to feel safe as you are entering in or are already in the perimenopausal season. And if you are in menopause, this episode is still for you. We are even discussing an extremely important organ that is often overlooked when it comes to women's health, especially hormonal health. Both your brain and your body will appreciate the great nuggets of information that Leisha is sharing with us today. But before we get started, I want to encourage you to stop letting fatigue and brain fog steal your joy in life. Fatigue isn't just about simply feeling tired. It's that constant brain fog, chronic low energy, and overwhelming sense that you just can't keep up with everything on your plate day in and day out. Does this sound like you? You're a high-achieving woman who feels foggy and mentally drained every afternoon. You're a driven woman whose energy seems to slip away faster than you can replenish it. And you've tried restrictive diets, supplements, and even medications, but nothing seems to stick. Your labs are always coming back fine, yet you know something is off. You just don't feel like yourself. Well, if you are nodding along and thinking, oh, yep, that's me, it's time to take action, my friend. Don't let low energy and brain fog steal any more of your life. Schedule your Fatigue Freedom Call today. That's a free 30-minute session where we will uncover your unique fatigue triggers, dive into what's really holding you back, and create a path to reclaiming your energy and mental clarity. This is your chance to feel heard, be supported, and equipped with a clear plan to restore your energy, focus, and joy. So go ahead and click the link in the show notes to book your call now and take that first step toward fatigue freedom. All right, settle in for my conversation today with Leisha Drews. Hi there, friend. You are listening to Treasured Wellness with your host, Michelle McCoy. On this show, I bring the simplicity and education around regaining energy and feeling better in both your brain and body as a midlife woman of God. You don't have to just survive through your day wishing for a nap or counting the hours till you can crawl back into bed. This show will bring you support, encouragement, and clarity using biblical principles and holistic health education to help you have more energy, lose the brain fog, and feel so much better in your whole health, body, mind, and spirit, and all in practical and doable ways. So grab your lemon water, Bible, and journal, and let's treasure your wellness. Okay, welcome back to the show. It's so good to have you back here on Treasured Wellness. Let me tell you about our guest today. Leisha Drews is a mom of three. She is an RN. She's a holistic hormone coach, and she loves to help women recover energy and improve mood and period symptoms. Yes. And she believes that hormones are one of our greatest gifts as women. And if we understand them, we can step into who we were truly called to be. And I just love that. And I'm going to definitely have her dive into that a little bit more. She has a great podcast called Happily Hormonal. So you will want to check that out. I'm so happy to chat with you today, Leisha. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's always fun to be able to chat hormones.
Yes. Well, it is such a topic of conversation everywhere for women of all ages, but especially as we reach that menopausal stage in life, that perimenopausal stage. There's so much confusion around it. So I know that our conversation may ebb and flow, and that's completely fine. But I do want to talk about one specific organ that is so important. It's such a vital, though it's often a missing piece of hormonal health. A lot of physicians don't really get the connection of it, and that is the liver. So can you give a quick breakdown of that connection between the liver and our hormones?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do work primarily with women I definitely work with women who are cycling. So I don't work with women as often in menopause, but perimenopause is absolutely still while you're cycling. And so I just want to say, like, my expertise is going to lean more that direction. And I will throw in a few things menopause wise as well, because I know that that can be helpful and I do have some knowledge there, but I'll mostly be talking in the context of still cycling, whether your cycles are kind of essentially what I would say petering out and they're a little irregular and we'll talk about all that. But in the context of cycling, what I really focus on when we're working on hormones and hormone balance from a natural perspective is number one, being able to make hormones well. And number two, being able to detox hormones well. And so there's a whole conversation we can have about both of those things. So number one, being able to make hormones well, you need to have the right nutrients in the right quantities, like throughout your day in a balanced way to be able to make hormones well. And that's estrogen for the first half of your cycle, it's progesterone for the second half of your cycle. They trigger each other. So it's really important that that whole picture is in place. But where the liver comes in is actually both sides of hormone balance. So to make hormones well, you have to have a lot of signals of safety in your body. And the liver has so many roles in the body, to be honest. It's probably like one of my favorite organs because the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, what in the world? And why is not everyone just talking about the liver all the time? But one of the big things I like to talk about for that first step of making hormones well is blood sugar balance. And the liver plays a pretty big role in blood sugar balance. And so if you are having trouble balancing your blood sugar throughout the day, this is not in the context of being diabetic, by the way. This is non-diabetic women who are still just having blood sugar imbalances. What that looks like is typically throughout your day, you would have kind of like ebbs and flows in energy, some crashes, and those can be, feeling anxious, irritable, shaky, hangry, like just angry in general. Like all of those things can come from blood sugar imbalances. And what I see most often is that women are actually not eating enough and not eating consistently. And what I mean by not eating enough is even if you're getting enough calories, which a lot of women are not, because we have been taught that eating a lot of calories is bad for us, and getting enough for a full-size woman's body is going to make us fat. And when we're not getting enough nutrients specifically, we're not getting enough of the things our bodies need to make hormones well, it's not going to be giving our bodies those signals of safety. And even more importantly, or just as importantly, I guess I can't really say it's more important, but is getting those nutrients in the right combinations at consistent intervals throughout the day. That's huge for blood sugar balance. And if your body is not getting that often, there's lots and lots of days where you wake up in the morning, you're rushing around, you drink some coffee right away, but you're not eating a full meal. And then maybe even for lunch, you're still kind of rushed and you're not eating necessarily a full meal or a balanced meal. We can see blood sugar crashes a lot. And when that blood sugar crashes, it's a full-on emergency in the body, because truly it is an emergency. You have to have enough glucose in your blood to keep your brain functioning. And so your body is going to be like, stop all the things, don't do anything outside of what's absolutely necessary, and let's get this blood sugar up. And so it's going to be a spike of cortisol, which is a big stress hormone. And when that happens, your body gets the signal of like, oh, things aren't safe. And if that's happening multiple days throughout your week or multiple times throughout your day, that signal of safety for you to make hormones well is going to be struggling, essentially. So the liver plays a big part in that glucose balance, because it stores glycogen, which is from healthy carbs, essentially. It stores glycogen in your liver. In a healthy liver, you can store glycogen for like 8 to 10 hours at night and keep your blood sugar stable. You can store that glycogen throughout your day to be able to help you make it between meals, because you don't need to be eating every hour by any means, but like every 3 to 4 hours is usually pretty healthy balance, where you have to actually take a break between your meals, but you're also eating consistently enough to keep that blood sugar stable. And if the liver has to spend its whole day really just like keeping your blood sugar afloat, it's not going to be detoxifying as well. So that's where we move into the second step, which is detoxing those hormones well. So if you're making enough estrogen or maybe too much, you're making enough progesterone, but your body is not able to get that out very well because your metabolism is slowed, because your thyroid is slowed, because your body has not been getting the signals of safety, and it's essentially in like slowdown mode. That's what we see a lot of times. Even if you do have weight gain, it's because your body over time says there's not enough here. I've got to hold on to everything. And the liver has been struggling to like keep your blood sugar balanced for days and weeks and years. And it's not able to take the time that it needs to be detoxifying well. And there are other organs involved in detox as well, but the liver is huge in both sides of hormone production and hormone detoxification. And to be honest, you have to have both pretty on point to not have PMS, to not have mood swings, to have regular cycles, and to just not feel kind of like all over the place with your period and have painful periods and things like that.
Yeah, that's so true. I agree. Why is the liver not discussed more than it is, right? Especially for women in this season for sure. So, okay, thank you for that explanation on why the liver is so important. And we're going to kind of jump over to how when our blood sugar is low, how we're not functioning properly, it can really affect our productivity in our life and in our work. So can you talk about when you are in that perimenopausal season? Your periods are spotty, they're inconsistent, you're just not feeling great, and you're not really sure where you're going. How long is this phase going to take? All of that. So can you just talk about that, and how does it really affect our brain and thereby our productivity?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think it's probably there's a lot of different directions I could go. But the first thing that I want to address is in perimenopause, I think it's easy to feel like everything has changed and nothing is the same as it was before. Where it's like kind of like, where am I going? I probably need to change everything, do everything differently with food or with exercise, or like my metabolism isn't keeping up as well as I want it to. And I'm always going to be a big advocate for going back to the basics. So blood sugar balance is going to be huge because it's going to support your adrenals. It's going to support your thyroid. Both of those things are really important for your metabolism, for your energy, for your mood. So I would actually kind of argue that whatever you've been doing in the past that has worked for you, you would almost lean into it more versus feeling like you have to start over. So for example, if you are someone who's been eating healthy and exercising and it was working for you, and then now your hormones are changing and it's not working as well, looking back at like, well, what part of that was working? Like, was it that I had this really good solid breakfast that had protein and healthy carbs? And maybe now that I'm, entering perimenopause, I'm shying away from that because I'm afraid of weight gain. Or is it, I was exercising, I was doing, strength training a couple of times a week. I was taking a couple walks and that was working for me. But once I was like, oh shoot, my period's starting to stop, I'm moving into menopause, I'm scared, you amped it up or you stopped. You did one or the other and you didn't like stay consistent. Those would be things that I would look back on, but also just realizing that those signals of safety get even more important as this season changes, because perimenopause, I believe, can be a pretty smooth season. It's natural, it's normal. I don't think it has to start at age 40 or 42. I think late 40s would be more ideal for that to start. And I think what you've done all the years before now is going to make a really big difference. But what you're doing now is also going to make a really big difference if you just could look at your overall, how you're taking care of your health and go back to the basics. Like, how can I just nourish myself really, really well in this season? Eat healthy, whole foods consistently. How can I exercise in a way that feels really good to my body, that doesn't leave me exhausted, but leaves me energized, that I know I'm moving consistently? Maybe I'm not trying to like win the CrossFit games, but I'm also not sitting on the couch. Like, I'm not like, well, now I'm, 45. And so I have to, be careful not to move my body. Right. So I think it's just that it's really easy in any season of life to have this all or nothing mentality where you're like, okay, I'm entering the next season, so everything has to change, or nothing is working, when really, again, like, it's always going to be probably somewhere in the middle. It's like, well, maybe a couple of things aren't working and that's why you're wondering what to do. But I usually find that leaning back into the things that worked really well before is a great place to start. And then you can seek out help and information and figure out where to go from there, essentially. But kind of when we look at productivity, there are changes in estrogen and progesterone in perimenopause. So say you had a 28-day cycle your whole life, now you've got a 45-day cycle. now you've got a 30 and then a 60 and then a 20, and then like it's all over the place.
Right.
Well, you're
Right.
going to be making more estrogen sometimes, less estrogen sometimes, more progesterone sometimes, less sometimes. So just so you can understand quickly what that looks like in a cycle is from the time your period starts until you ovulate. That can range, that could be a different amount of time each month if you're having irregular cycles. But from that time, estrogen is going to be dominant. It starts out really low at the beginning of your cycle, then it starts to rise as you're moving toward ovulation. If you're having a 60-day cycle, for example, you're going to have about 45 days until you ovulate. So that's going to be totally different. You're going to have more estrogen that cycle, but estrogen's going to stay at a lower level, and then it's going to rise quickly right before ovulation, just like it always would. But you're going to have a longer time where it's at a low level. And then you'll make progesterone for 2 weeks, hopefully, and then you'll have your period. And that would be a lot different than if you have a 23-day cycle and you ovulate a lot earlier. You ovulate like day 10, and then you make progesterone for 2 weeks, and then you have your period. So just understanding that there are going to be hormonal shifts if your cycles are irregular is really helpful, and understanding what that could mean for mood, productivity. When estrogen is higher, it can be helpful for focus and for the kind of like more optimal thought function. And so having those regular peaks in estrogen is really helpful for women. Some women notice, especially ones who lean more towards like ADHD symptoms, they notice that their best productivity is right around ovulation when estrogen is highest, and that when estrogen is lower, that they don't have as much optimal thought function or productivity. And even in a cycle, you're going to have a little spike of estrogen toward the end of your cycle too. And so there's a lot of different times where there's estrogen. But if you're having those long cycles, all of a sudden it's going to feel different. And so you may need to support your adrenals a little bit more where you didn't need to before. You may need a little bit more like mood support or brain support, or you may just need to be honest, actually take care of yourself when you didn't have to before. Right? That may be the biggest thing, is like you're not able to get away with as much as you were before. But I think understanding what your cycles are doing is really helpful for productivity, because then you can kind of adjust and give yourself grace where you need to, versus just expecting that you're going to feel the same 24/7.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it's so true. Like, what's not working? Like, I teach my clients to ask what's not right instead of what's wrong, right? So what's not right? Okay, I've always done this workout routine. I've always eaten this way. It's not the same anymore. Things are different. So that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So to speak, and you just stop everything, or you throw your hands up and say, well, this is how it's going to be. This is my lot in life. My mother told me this was going to happen, right? So no, you, for one, you can change your gene expression. And for two, lifestyle and nutrition changes go so far. The effects, the benefits are so far reaching. So you don't ever have to really listen to how it was for your family. I mean, a little bit of that genetic, right? Sure. But don't claim that as that's going to be your lot in life if it wasn't good. So I love that you said go back to the basics. Yes, absolutely. And again, you mentioned your body needs to feel safe. And we talk about that in the Midlife Health Makeover, about how your body needs to feel safe and secure. And if you are doing things repeatedly that are not sending those safety signals, right, your body is going to hold on. Like, you're not going to lose that extra fat around your middle, around your belly, because it doesn't trust you, because it doesn't feel safe and secure. So we need to work through that. And a lot of that is mindset, self-care, a lot of that, like you said. And women come to me after a lifetime of pouring into others, their family, their career, their church. And they almost like wake up one day and they're like, oh my goodness, I cannot keep living this way. I feel horrible. So we have to take time to pour into ourselves for a season so that we can continue to pour into others. So I do want to ask you though, can we just talk about birth control for a quick second? What should women do when they don't want to be on birth control anymore? They're in perimenopause, or not necessarily in menopause yet, and they decide they want to take an IUD out. They don't want a late in life baby, Like that
Yeah.
can really throw off. If you thought that you were no longer cycling, but now you are when you take your IUD out or you stop your birth control. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that? What can women do?
That's a great question. So I actually right now, I love that you're asking me this. We're recording this in September and I'm doing every single week this month. I'm talking about birth control on my podcast, Happily Hormonal. So come listen to that if you're like, this is the question for me. I need to know more about how birth control works, what some options are. I think that birth control is a very personal issue. And I really believe in informed consent for women. I want you to know exactly what your birth control is doing so you can decide if that is or isn't right for you in that season. But I love this question about like you're having irregular cycles. Maybe you've never done fertility awareness method or tracked your cycle before. And that is going to be my answer of like best case scenario is learn to track your cycle. There's a book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility that's really, really great. I love that book. There are, you could look for a fertility awareness method or a FAM provider who teaches how to track your cycle really consistently and really accurately, because that is going to give you the confidence that you need. So when cycles are irregular, it is more tricky, but it can absolutely still work. It can still happen. If you don't feel comfortable with that, there are other options that you can take hormonal birth control. You can do the hormonal or non-hormonal IUD. And especially if you're having longer cycles, as like I said, they're kind of petering out, your chances for pregnancy are going to be pretty low. Again, all you need is a 1 in a million chance, and it's the 1 in a million for you. So I'm not taking that for granted by any means, but your chances are going to be lower if you're ovulating less. So if that's the case and you find out you're ovulating less, then you don't have a lot of days per month that you really need to be worried about fertility, as long as you know which days they are. And so that I think that's really like my ideal would be, especially women who are nearing the end of their cycling years, would have the insight and capacity and knowledge to be able to track their cycles well when they're, not in the place that they're wanting to have a baby, but wanting to be off of birth control after years and years. So that's kind of the main thing. There's something I can't say I'm 100% recommending it, but something that I'm interested in at this point, and I think this is, again, totally my opinion. Do not base all your life decisions on it. But there is a cream. It's called Wise Woman's Choice, I believe. And it's not a cream that you have to take every day, but what it does is it decreases motility of sperm, so they can't get anywhere near the egg that you may or may not have. I am considering, or this is something I'm going to try myself in a season where I would love to have a fourth baby, but I don't want to have my fourth baby. I'd like to wait a year or so, but if it happened, it happened. So this is a good time for me to try it because it's not high risk for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try it. I can report back in a year and let you know how it works. With that being said, this is just something, if you're someone who's like, interesting, I might research that for myself. That is an option that is non-hormonal. I think could be very safe in a low fertility time of life, especially. Their efficacy rate is very high according to their studies. But again, like it's outside of the box compared to what we're used to. So I don't assume that everyone would feel comfortable with that. But that's just something I just wanted to throw out because I didn't know about it till recently. And I very much track my cycle, use fertility awareness method, and this would be a good time to try that out because I know there's a lot of people who would like alternatives.
Yeah, especially those that are wanting more of a natural alternative instead of being even on a low hormonal IUD or something. A lot of women just would prefer not to have any of that, but they also would prefer not to have a baby at 45 or 50. So,
right.
Yeah, so that's really helpful too. Okay, awesome. Well, I love to talk about nutrition. I love to talk about how nutrition specifically helps our bodies to heal and recover from things like fatigue, brain fog, belly bloat, inflammation, all of that. So let's talk about how nutrition affects our hormones, right? So why does really good nourishment matter when it comes to balancing those hormones? And Second question, what foods should be absolutely off limits for women if you are struggling with balancing your hormones?
Yeah, so this is a huge question, and it goes back to the two things that I already started talking about, making hormones well, detoxing hormones well. So when I'm working with my clients, and we're in that step of making hormones well, nourishment is truly the biggest piece. And what I really look for is eating whole foods, organic as much as possible, just eating really real food makes a huge difference on your hormones, because when we think about the alternative, it just like absolutely makes sense. So in processed
Right.
foods, in conventional, dairy and meat that is really not well cared for, that has a lot of antibiotics and hormones and just excess things, it's going to be harder for your body to extract nutrients. And it's going to be harder for your body to get rid of all the extra things, the pesticides, the chemicals, all the random ingredients in the processed foods. Like all of that is something your body has to detox, and the more you're getting in, the harder it is for your body to detox that. So if we're thinking about number one, your body needs nutrients to make hormones well. You're going to be getting more nutrients out of whole real foods than out of processed foods. Hands down, everyone knows that. But are you doing it? I think is always the question. Because convenience
Right.
is very convenient and we're busy, right? So you need those nutrients to make hormones well. Why that matters is your body needs to have healthy fats to make hormones. It needs to have enough protein to keep rebuilding your cells and to give you energy and to help your liver function well. And you need to have healthy carbs as well to help support your metabolism and your thyroid. And there's a lot of nutrients in healthy carbs, like fruits and root veggies. Like you're getting a lot of micronutrients and macronutrients in those as well. So your body needs that real food, and it needs to be able to extract those nutrients. And it's going to do that better if it's not essentially fighting against all the negative things that we could get in our modern food. And then when we look at the detox side of it, it just makes perfect sense that not only, medications and birth control and all of those things are a higher load on your liver, a higher load on your gut, that it's going to have to work harder. But the same thing with like pesticides and all of that in our food. It's like if you're looking at it like a bathtub, I like to look at our bodies and detox like a bathtub. It's like, if the faster the water is going in, the faster the toxins are coming in, the harder it's going to be for the bathtub not to overflow. So the drain has to be open, which means our liver and our lymphatic system and our gut, like thyroid, all of that needs to be working well. But also, like, we need to slow down the faucet, because if you have Niagara Falls coming in your bathtub, it's only going to take about 2 seconds for that to overflow, no matter how good the drain is. So that's why it matters for hormones, because the brain is always searching for threats, essentially. And if there's an overflow of toxins, if there's not enough nutrients, your brain is looking for those signals of safety. And if your body says, I have what I need, there's not too many toxins, I'm able to keep up, your body says, okay. And the brain is speaking to the adrenal glands to put out stress hormones all the time, but it's also speaking to the ovaries in women to put out sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone. And that system is completely connected. And so the adrenals, the thyroid, the ovaries, they're all speaking to each other all the time. And if there's too much stress or too much toxic burden on the body, it's going to say, we're not prioritizing estrogen and progesterone right now, because fertility is absolutely not necessary. Like, this woman is already stressed. She's already running from a bear. Her body's overloaded. She doesn't have the energy or the resources to make a baby. So that doesn't mean you can't get pregnant, but it means your body is not focused on fertility. And so if it's not focused on fertility, it's not making those hormones well.
Yeah. So what would you say is one of the top things that women should do to help their hormones, but they aren't?
So honestly, the first thing for me would be blood sugar balance. And we've already talked about that, but that's huge. I see huge benefits from blood sugar balance, and just checking in, like, how much are you eating processed food versus how much are you eating real food? Are you getting, a wide variety of nutrients? Are you getting enough protein? Those are the first things I always check on. And usually some of those are missing. But blood sugar balance is probably my first answer, because I see them most of the time that's an issue. And if it's not, there's other things that we can find that are an issue, but it's pretty common.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, this has been really, really helpful, Leisha. I really appreciate you coming on. You have an amazing podcast. So if you are in that perimenopausal season, like definitely check out Happily Hormonal. Last question, would you share a treasured truth, a little bit of encouragement with our listeners?
Yeah, so I love what you said earlier. That's like just because like what your health is right now is, we could say it's the hand you've been dealt or it's what you've been given. Like it doesn't mean you're stuck there. I just believe that so deeply that there's always improvement that can be made, even in a stressful season, even in a busy season, even with low resources at the moment, whatever that looks like for you. There's something that you can do that will make you feel better. And I just see that as such a snowball effect. Like once you do one little thing and you're like, okay, I'm 10% better. Like you can do the next thing that gets you another 5 or 10 or 20% better. And that snowball, maybe you're not headed to 100% in the next 2 months, but like if you're 50% better, that's huge. And you have the capacity, for the next thing. And I just find that so much of the time, it, like you said, it's like, this is what runs in my family, or this is, how it is for me. And I just think that that's a limited belief. And I just see it proven wrong again and again when we just get the right nutrition, the right lifestyle changes. So I just want to encourage you that even if you're like, I'm in perimenopause, I didn't know anything about my hormones this whole time, I was on birth control for a million years. Like today is today, and there are things you can do about it. So
yeah, I love that. I have so many women that are, when they come into the program, they're like apologizing because they're not doing everything at 100%. And I'm like, it's not about that. It's not perfection. It's never about perfection this side of heaven. It's always about the progress, the steps that you're taking every day to move the needle forward. And, doing the program at 50% is better than not doing it at all. Right. So,
absolutely.
The shame and the blame, all that has to go, because that is just the world's way of dieting, really. And what you and I are talking about is not diet mentality. It's about living a lifestyle that is conducive for us to have not only happy hormones and great health, but optimal living and longevity for our children and our children's children. So it's so much deeper. It is such a deeper reason why we need to be well. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure. Tell our listeners how they can find you, aside from your amazing podcast, Happily Hormonal. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so my podcast is my favorite place, but I do have a website as well, and that's leishadrews.com. And then if you're on Instagram, you can find me at Leisha Drews on Instagram. And I do have a quiz that you might want to take if you're kind of wondering, like, where am I at with my hormones? And it will tell you one of the top 3 hormone imbalances that I see and which one is most applicable to you. And then I'll send you a few podcast episodes that relate to that, so you can kind of get a little more of a deep dive and understand it better. So that would be a great place to start, and then reach out from there.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Leisha. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I hope today's episode challenged you, encouraged you, and stretched you in some way. If it did, please take a few seconds to share this episode with whomever you are thinking of right now, because she just may be praying for a breakthrough in her own health. Also, it would be such a blessing to me if you popped over to Apple Podcasts and left me a quick review to let me know how much you are liking the content. Your review helps other Christian women to find the show. Treasured Wellness is also on YouTube and on Christian Mix 106 streaming radio. Until next time, remember, you are a beautiful treasure and your body is a temple, so treasure your wellness.